Hey everyone, this is Mike, and Season of the Worthy for Destiny 2 is now about a week old, almost a week, and I thought I'd talk about it, some of the new stuff that they introduced in the game when it comes down to some playable content, as well as some of the new seasonal content that's available, because this time around they did introduce, or reintroduce I should say, a new PvP mode, which is going to be staying around for the rest of this game, so it's not just going to be here for this season, and then also just kind of talk about some of the new changes and my kind of opinion on those. So first of all, when it comes down to story, we're now basically trying to arm the Warmind, which is Rasputin, to basically shoot down the Almighty, which is the big ship that the Cabal have that was trying to destroy our sun and then blow up our whole solar system. But of course that thing was just flying around aimlessly in space, and now they're trying to crash it down on Earth to destroy us all basically. So I actually expected there to be much more interaction with the story. All we basically got was a longer cutscene than they already gave us in the the overview trailer of Season of the Worthy. So I kind of expected more stuff that we were going to do with it rather than just a simple cutscene, but hopefully there will be like a story mission or something following later, kind of like we did with rescuing Saint 14 last season around, because those were pretty cool missions. So it would be really cool to see if we can get something like that later down the line. Now, how we actually go about arming Rasputin and stuff like that is there are basically 3 Warmind bunkers, or well, Seraph bunkers I believe they're called, scattered throughout a few planets. There's one on Io, one on Earth, and then I also believe there's going to be one on the moon. So far we only have the one on Earth available. Now the way these Seraph bunkers work are essentially like Obelisks 2.0 from Season of Dawn. You go there, you pick up bounties, the bounties give you currency, and then you spend that currency on certain upgrades. There is of course a most efficient way to go about upgrading these bunkers if you want to maximize the currency gain that you get and that kind of stuff, or minimize the currency spending, because there's also one of the upgrades which makes it cheaper to buy other upgrades as well. So there's kind of things that you can do. Now once you've unlocked these bunkers, you do have to clear them once every day, because they get overrun by some fallen enemies. Why it keeps getting swarmed, I have no idea, but basically every day you have to go in there, clear out the bunker, you get a piece of loot at the end, and then you basically can go pick up the bounties, pick up weapon frames and that kind of stuff if you want to farm those. And then you also get access to the legendary lost sectors, which is basically a lost sector that is set at, I believe it's 1,000 light, so right now it's still pretty tough, but once people get more gear and that kind of stuff, those should not be too hard. But basically it's a more difficult version of a lost sector, and it also introduces champions in there, so it's pretty fun to do those. I've always liked lost sectors as a concept, because it's basically like mini dungeons, and now basically having a harder version of that is kind of interesting to me, so I do quite enjoy that. Now when it comes down to the public event that we have, the Seraph Tower defense thingy, I was kind of expecting this to be something different. Like for example, if we look at the previous 2 seasons, we had the Vex Offensive, which was a 6-player instance thing I believe, and then for Season of Dawn we had the Sundial. So I was kind of expecting this seasonal content for Season of the Worthy to also be an instance thing that we would do with other people and not just a public event. Right now, or at least the last time I did the public event, because it's been a few days since I've done it, but it was still pretty tough because the enemies are high power level, and if you're just set there by yourself, you have to kind of get lucky that other people also join in on the event and that kind of stuff, unless of course you have a few friends that can join you. But overall, I'm not a huge fan. It's also not super interesting. It's basically just hold out against those, like a wave of enemies, and then pick up the small balls and throw it at the big ball. So not too much interaction right there when it comes down to mechanics or anything like that. It's basically just a glorified public event that we got, which was our seasonal event. So when it comes down to what the season introduces, I think the Seraph Bunker system is kind of alright. Does remind me a lot of the Obelisk systems from last season. And then the legendary lost sectors I am a pretty big fan of. Now, what I am even more of a fan of this season is the changes that came to PvP, as well as the reintroduction of Trials of Osiris. Now, if you played Destiny 1 before, you probably know what Trials of Osiris is. If you've played Destiny 2, when it first came out, back in year 1, we had Trials of the Nine, which is basically kind of similar to it, but a little bit different. So the way Trials of the Nine worked was you picked up a card, and then you either got 7 wins or 3 losses. Whichever happened first would determine the loot you got. But if you also went 7-0, aka going flawless, you would go into like this extra special room, I guess you could call it, and then you got some piece of flawless loot, which was some really cool looking loot with like extra special effects on the gear and that kind of stuff. And then you would also get a glow around your head, showing that you went flawless this week, which was always really cool. Did it a few times with my friends back then, but eventually we kind of stopped doing it. I also went and played Final Fantasy a bunch back then, so didn't always have time to do it because Trials was only available on the weekend. Now, Trials of Osiris is basically the same, but just a different game type. For the Trials of the Nine was kind of like a search and destroy thing. I think it's called Countdown in Destiny, I'm not 100% sure. But it's basically like the game type that Counter-Strike usually uses as well. And then when it comes down to Trials of Osiris, it's elimination. So you just all go in with only one life. You get killed, you need to be rest to come back and that kind of stuff. And then it's first to, I believe, 5 rounds. That wins the round, and then you go from there. And then you try to get that same flawless thing as well. You do have bounties that work here now as well, which I actually think is a very bad decision because it doesn't make any sense. Trials of Osiris is meant to be this place where you are going to be very competitive when it comes down to PvP. And this week, for example, they threw in bounties to get scout rifle and fusion rifle kills, which is like, well, on one hand, I want to use my hand cannon, shotgun, sniper, whatever, but they kind of want you to use scouts and fusions, which is not necessarily the best thing to use in a competitive environment. So it is kind of, when it comes down to that. Me and my friends went for a serious run first where we got our 7 wins, and then once we were done with that, we basically just reset our card and then went in with our meme loadouts to try and get those bounties done. So honestly, not a huge fan of the way that they handled the bounties. Would much more make sense to me if they added, for example, like get 15 kills or get grenade kills or something like that, which they had with the repeatable bounties, which I was fine with. But the more weapon specific bounties, I really don't think that was a good idea. Now, when it comes down to the tickets, kind of like how it worked with the Trials of the Nine ticket, you basically pick one up, get 7 wins, you are done, 7-0, you get to go to the lighthouse for special loot and cool glowy armor, and if you get 3 losses, you're done as well, and you have to reset your ticket if you want to go for those 7 wins. This time around though, you have 5 different tickets that you can choose from, and depending on which ticket you pick up, you get a special bonus. For example, there's one where I believe if you win the first 3 games without losing one, you get your 4th win for free. There's also one where your first loss doesn't count, so that's really useful if you're trying to go flawless. There's also one that gives you bonus tokens, and then you can trade in the tokens for weapons and that kind of stuff, or actually for the loot that is available that week, because it's on a weekly cycle. And then different loot will be available every week. So, for example, if you're after, say, the scout rifle, you wanted to play a lot this week, because this week the scout rifle was available. And then maybe, say, for example, next week the shotgun is available, maybe you'll want to play more then because you're after that shotgun or something like that. And maybe the week after that, they're just given like armor and the fusion rifle, and say you're not so interested in getting armor and the fusion rifle, then maybe you don't play much that week or something like that. So I think the rotating loot is kind of cool for people that want to go after specific loot drop, because of course you don't gain a crazy amount of tokens like you would with, for example, the Crucible or something like that. So I do think that is a pretty cool system. When it comes down to the sandbox changes, I am kind of alright with them, although it does kind of feel that Heartlight is in a pretty good spot right now. So basically what happened was they nerfed shotguns a bit. Rapid fire snipers also can't 2-tap body shot anymore, so you do need to get a precision shot with those. But more importantly, and the thing that's happening in Crucible a lot right now, and especially in competitive as well, is auto rifles got a pretty big buff, specifically the 600 RPM auto rifles, if I'm not mistaken, which is stuff like Suros Regime and Hardlight. And those 2 guns, especially Hardlight, are currently dominating Crucible, I would say. Kind of feels a little bit too strong in my opinion. Then again, I'm not a very good PvP player in Destiny, so it might seem a little bit stronger than it is because I'm just not that good of a player, but it does feel really strong at the moment. I wouldn't say nerf it just yet because of course we're all just getting used to the changes, but you can't really get around to the fact that it is a really strong gun. Once I do manage to get the catalyst for it, I'm definitely going to be trying it out myself, because right now I've only been playing around with Suros, and I just got my hands on Luna's Howl, so that's a gun that I want to try out and get better with as well. So we'll have to wait and see about those kind of things, but so far I think the sandbox right now is in a pretty good place. Auto rifles feel really strong, but that could just be a feeling because you're used to them being relatively weak compared to other stuff, but so far, if my aim is good, I can still outshoot auto rifles with my hand cannon or something like that. So I think right now it's in a pretty good spot, quite liking the way the game went. And when it comes down to the armor changes and stuff, that's even better. because right now you can basically get a lot more higher stat rolls when it comes down to pinnacle rewards and that kind of stuff. Exotics can now also or at least will roll with more higher stat rolls as well. So those are all really good changes, and you can also change the polarity, or aka the elemental thing that is on your gear, by paying those mats as well. So say for example you have an exotic that you like using a lot, and you have 3 different exotics of that one, but they're all solar, for example. You can now switch the element to void and then arc for the 3rd one or something like that. So that's a really good change. Makes it so that getting gear is not too big of a drag. And on the other hand, you can also, if you have seasonal gear, you can use seasonal mods on those as well from the previous and from the next season. So say for example you have seasonal gear from Season of Dawn, it can hold both Season of the Undying mods as well as Season of the Worthy mods. So I think that's a really cool system, how gear is now basically going to last you a lot longer than it did before. So all in all, I think sandbox changes, the introduction or reintroduction of Trials of Osiris, and then the changes that came to the armor and the quality of life changes that happened there, I think were really good. When it comes down to the actual seasonal content, the Seraph bunkers and such, legendary lost sectors are cool, clearing out that Seraph bunker every day is alright as well, but the Seraph Tower public event, not a huge fan of that. So I think moreover this season was a very good change to the quality of life things and the balance of the game, and not necessarily a really good thing when it came down to content that was added to the game. Trials of Osiris, of course, is here to stay, which I'm very happy about, but the Seraph Tower stuff, not huge, well, not really into it, I'll say it like that. Hopefully they do make some changes towards the later half of the expansion, or the season, I guess you could say, where they introduce these other Seraph bunkers, and maybe they will introduce some other stuff with that together as well. But we'll have to wait and see for that. So far, pretty happy with the way that the season turned out. Maybe not super interested in the seasonal content itself, because it does feel kind of lame. It's basically just grind bounties and that's it. But outside of that, I am pretty happy with the way that it turned out. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.